everyone, how are you doing? Welcome back. My name is Rinima Borah, and this is my solo podcast, Shh, episode 7. Today, I am sharing one of the most transformative periods of my life from ages 23 to 28. These years were filled with incredible professional growth, intense personal struggles, toxic relationships, and some of the hardest lessons I have ever had to learn. And this isn't just a story about heartbreak or professional success, quite honestly. It's about navigating life when it feels like everything is pulling you down. So let's dive in. So at 23, I was working at Dell as a communication trainer. It was a massive career leap for me, coming from Convergence, which I shared in my last podcast, where I had started as a call-taking agent. I joined Dell in 2009 and it felt like a dream. But here is the thing, my personal life was a nightmare. I was still in a relationship with Gandu. Of course, you know who. And he was also at Dell when I joined initially, though he left about a year and a half later. And the irony, he was the one who suggested I apply to Dell in the first place because he was there already. And let me tell you what happened next. I went through the regular interview process at Dell, aced it, and got the job as a communication or soft skills trainer. Gandu, who was about 10 years older to me and had 10 years of more experience than I did, was still a call-taking agent at the time. And while I was thrilled about my career move, he was consumed by insecurity. And this was the first time I personally experienced something and only heard about in gossip or seen in daily soaps. How some men, Indian men mostly, just can't handle their wives or partners being more successful, isn't it? It's rooted in deep patriarchy and a superiority complex where they believe that their role as a man is to always be in control, to be above the woman in every way, especially financially. So Gandu couldn't really handle the fact that I, 10 years younger than him, had not only landed a job at Dell, but also started 2 grades above him. And I realized that his behavior isn't just about his own career. It was about his ego. And he would make snide remarks, subtly undermine my achievements, and sometimes belittle my work to make himself feel better. And this was a pattern I hadn't recognized, honestly, until it was happening to me. And it was heartbreaking, of course. But moving on, we all know how that relationship ended, but Dell has a huge role to play in it. So at Dell, along with my professional growth that I was thoroughly enjoying, I think I formed some really close personal connections that deeply impacted my life until this day. Among them were Shail, which is short for my friend Shailesh, who is still one of my closest friends today, and Fatang. Yes, we are calling him that for reasons you will understand soon, who eventually actually becomes my second boyfriend and unfortunately my second toxic relationship. And at the time, Shail, Fatang, and I formed a very close-knit trio. While working, we shared our lunch and dinner breaks. Sometimes we worked on projects together. We were in the same team. We were all communication trainers and eventually became like the best of friends, even outside of work. And Shail, being the perpetually single guy he was, and still is, by the way, always played the cool, carefree friend who had plenty of advice about relationships. It was mostly about why staying single is the best option. I believe him completely now. Don't tell my husband. But meanwhile, Fatang and I were opening up to each other on a deeper level, right? We were sharing struggles from our personal lives. I remember confiding in him and both of them, in fact, about the domestic violence I was feeling at home, the control, the fear I was facing in my relationship with Gandu. And I was terrified of leaving Gandu at that point because of his relentless threats. But I feel their support, along with the intervention of my HR director in Dell, which I again shared more in the last podcast, finally gave me the courage to take a stand against that relationship. But on the other hand, Fatang also began sharing details about his own struggles. His marriage was falling apart. I remember his wife was pregnant at the time, and while he was thrilled about becoming a father, I think he confided in Shail and I that the emotional distance in their relationship had been growing for years, and he was caught in the delicate balance of navigating separation, I think at the time, while ensuring he remained a good father. And Shail, with his usual charm and wit, became the glue, honestly, that held us together during this period because we were struggling in relationships and Shail wasn't. He was the objective friend, offering advice and cracking jokes to lighten these heavy-hearted conversations. For me, honestly, this trio became my safe space during one of the most challenging phases of my life. I looked forward to coming to work and talking to these friends of mine. And though I have no connection with Fatang today because I strongly believe in not staying in touch with exes, I do give credit where it's due. That's the person I am. And at that moment, honestly, their support meant the world to me. As for Shail, he remains one of my closest friends even today, like I told you, and I'm grateful for his continued presence in my life, and I hope that remains that way forever. Because remember, not everyone who comes into our life stays for good, but those who stand by us in our most difficult moments, they do deserve some recognition, and both Shail and Fatang did just that during this time, and I'm grateful to both of them. So now you already know how Fatang and I were colleagues and friends in Dell at first, right? We worked together in the same team, shared our personal struggles as friends and colleagues, and became close during a time when we were both navigating the turbulence in our personal lives. And after I finally ended my relationship, 7-year-old relationship with Gandu, Fatang also in the meantime eventually separated from his wife. His baby was only 6 months old when his wife moved out of their house, and they began co-parenting while taking time to work through their separation. He was dealing with his own stuff. I was dealing with my own stuff. But it was around this time that Fatang started pursuing me. And at first, I honestly wasn't attracted to him because he was a colleague and a friend. Even as a friend, I liked him. But the idea of dating him at the time was far from my mind. I had just come out of a deeply traumatic and violent relationship. And for the first time in my life, I was enjoying being single. So I wasn't really looking to jump into another relationship so quickly because being single felt so freeing, and I wanted to hold on to that feeling and independence for as long as I could. But haven't you heard pretty girls don't get to be single for too long? But that's why I feel Fatang was persistent. He pursued me for a good 6 to 8 months, chipping away at my reservations. And I think one of my biggest fears was dating a man who was separated but not divorced yet. I never wanted to be seen as a homewrecker. Like, that word carries so much weight, especially in a society like ours or any society, and rightfully so. And I've always believed in karma, right? I didn't want to invite negative energy into my life, so I told him plainly that I wouldn't even consider being with him until he had officially finalized his divorce and all of that was sorted. But I think what finally pushed me was not just the persistence, but also what finally honestly let my guard down and fall for Fatang was his persistence and the effort he put into making me feel special. The guy didn't give up. I still remember the day he planned a surprise party for me. I had just come out of the hospital after being sick for nearly 10 days with a bad throat infection. I was weak, tired, and honestly not expecting much, but Fatang went all out. He had printed black and white photo frames of me, beautifully framed them and set up a cozy private house party at a friend's place. Shail was there too. He dimmed all the lights, filled the room with candles, and picked up his guitar to serenade me. He played, "I'm leaving on a jet plane, don't know when I'll be back again." You know that song by John Denver? A song I'll honestly never forget because of the way it made me feel at that moment. So the whole setup was so intimate, so thoughtful, so romantic, and overwhelmingly romantic. And for someone like me who was still healing from a past filled with control and violence, I was just 23, right? And this kind of tenderness and effort was hard to resist at that age. So I couldn't help but fall for him finally. And when he asked me that night to be his girlfriend, I said yes. And I was swept up in the romance, the thoughtfulness, and the idea that maybe this time it would be different. And during this time, there was also Shail, like I told you, right? While we all remained close friends, I think what also happened in the meantime was Shail confessed to Fatang that he had started developing feelings for me. And one point I forgot to tell you, they were both cousins, third cousins. So it was innocent, I think, on his part, and I completely understood it. Sometimes infatuation can happen. We hung out so much that it could happen, especially like when you spend a lot of time with someone. But you know what stood out to me? And what still stands out to me until today about this guy is how chivalrously Shail handled the situation. He gracefully accepted my feelings when I told him I wasn't interested in him that way, and I was falling for Fatang. And he even told Fatang, "She's into you, bro, and that's okay. Let me tell you, it takes a lot for a man to handle rejection with such maturity and grace. I mean, many men would let their ego get in the way to turn bitter, but not Shail. He was such a content guy, still is. I think girls run behind him. He's just so amazing, so he didn't care. He remained my rock during that time, yo. He offered support without any malice or resentment. And I think that's why Shail continues to be one of my best and closest friends to this day. And even today, he behaves, although sometimes he behaves like an asshole at times now, you know who you are, Shail, if you are listening. So at that moment, though, Shail was truly one of the most chivalrous men I have ever known. He still is, jokes apart. And I think a lot of men could learn from how he handled himself then. A lot to learn from him. Lot. And for those of you who are wondering, yes, my husband knows all about this. In fact, he knows everything. Probably even more details than I have shared here with you all. And that's one of the things I love about Gautam. He's not just my husband, he is truly my best friend, my rock. And I will appreciate that for as long as I live. Now, the first 2 years with Fatang were magical, or so I thought. We traveled constantly, partied every weekend, and shared a mutual love for music, dancing. It felt like we were living this dream life, where every weekend was an adventure, every party an escape. But looking back, the cracks were already forming beneath the shiny surface. For one, I had built our relationship on a lie. I was so embarrassed about my background, coming from a small village in Assam, that I told him that I was born and raised in Delhi. I didn't want him to see me as anything less than his equal, because he was a Bangalore guy, a Roman Catholic, smart Bangalore dude. So I wanted to be equal. And to maintain that delusion, I took out loans, bought expensive gifts, and funded lavish vacations. From high-end watches to constant outings and dinners and parties, I was sinking deeper into debt, trying to keep up with an image that wasn't even real. And Shail, who remained a close friend, often pointed out the flaws in the foundation of my relationship with Fatang. He would often tell me, Rini, that's what he calls me, I think your relationship feels so materialistic. What will you do when the gifts stop, the vacations end, and life gets real? Do you think will there be something left? And at the time I brushed it off, because the relationship was just so nice. But his words lingered in my mind and made sense much later. And slowly I began to realize that Fatang honestly lacked responsibility. He was a boy for sure, not a man. His commitment issues were becoming more apparent to me, and he was beginning to show signs of insecurity and immaturity. I remember slowly around the end of the relationship, I catch him leching at other women in public, subtly flirting with girls from work, and I couldn't ignore the growing pressure he placed on me for physical intimacy. He needed a lot of sex. It felt relentless and I struggled to keep up. What was most shocking to me though was his temper. The man who had once stood up for me against domestic violence was now beginning to show violent tendencies himself. The fights between us escalated so quickly, from arguments to verbal abuse. And I will never claim to have been a saint in the relationship. Let me tell you that. I know I also became verbally very abusive. I said things I shouldn't have, I regret until today, and so did he. And the constant tension brought out the worst in both of us. The honeymoon phase was over. It ended pretty soon, and I was beginning to see Fatang for who he truly was. And he started to begin to see me who I truly was, I think. And as the cracks deepened, his interest began to drift away from mine. He no longer wanted to party or dance with me. He would just stay back at home, playing board games with his cousins and friends, while I would still want to go out to the same parties, and I still went out alone. Age-wise, he was 3 years older to me, but his actions often felt far less mature. The distance between us only kept growing, both emotionally and physically, as the shiny facade of our relationship continued to fall apart. I think while the relationship with Fatang was unraveling, my personal life back home was also turning into a whirlwind of responsibility and heartbreak. It was really one of the toughest phases of my life. My dad's health was deteriorating rapidly. He was diagnosed with diabetes, and his pre-existing conditions like arthritis, hypertension, and thyroid issues were worsening to the point where he could no longer work. For a man who worked tirelessly his whole life, it was devastating. And as his young daughter, I felt it was my responsibility to step in. My mom was nearing retirement, and with no stable income left in the household, my family kind of began to rely on me completely for dad's medical support. And adding to the storm, my sister married her love, despite knowing he was far from the right man for her. And her marriage also soon turned into a nightmare within a year, rife with its own share of violence. But amidst the chaos, she gave birth to a beautiful boy, Ronnie, who I now cherish and raise as my own. And whenever I think of Ronnie today, though, I realize how life's most painful decisions sometimes often lead to blessings we cannot imagine. But it didn't feel that way at that point, I'll tell you that. But if not for that toxic marriage, we wouldn't have Ronnie in our lives today. And honestly, I can't imagine a life without him. I just cannot. He's everything to me. He brought purpose to our family's suffering, even though my mom ended up being the one raising him. I mean, mom and dad both were the ones who ended up raising him while dealing with all of my dad's medical challenges. Financially, I was crumbling under the weight of responsibilities. The loans I had taken to sustain a fake lifestyle with Fatang were already suffocating me. And now with my dad's medical expenses piling up, my debts only grew. And I had to fly my parents back and forth between Assam and Bangalore for treatments, medical treatments, booking flights, arranging hospital visits at Manipal, and covering every cost. And while constantly reassuring them that, oh, don't worry, I have all the money. You know what the truth was? I was bloody flat broke. Flat out broke. And I was borrowing money from anyone and everyone. Friends, colleagues, acquaintances, people I've met maybe just once, strangers at times. And I remember my phone never stopped ringing with calls at that point, and texts from people demanding for repayments, banks chasing me for EMIs, private money lenders chasing me for EMIs. The humiliation was unbearable, I'll tell you. But the thought of telling Fatang about my struggles was even worse. I knew he would not support me emotionally or financially. In fact, it would only add to my shame. So I just kept my phone on silent, hiding the barrage of calls and messages from him, pretending to be okay when inside I was just bloody falling apart. And the stress was just eating away at me. You know, I was sinking into depression, dad's situation, my relationship with Fatang. I was gaining so much weight. I was losing focus at work, this career-oriented girl. I went from being one of the top performers in Dell to barely being able to concentrate on my job. And by now I am a team manager. I have been promoted as a team manager. I was handling a team of 25 people. And eventually I had no choice but to quit. At that time, I thought leaving Dell might ease some of my stress and allow me to take a break to heal and regroup. But looking back today, I don't know what I was thinking. I deeply regret. I also pressured Fatang to quit his 10-year job at Dell. I thought that both of us taking a break, we could rekindle our relationship and start fresh, but it only worsened things. He was in Dell for over 10 years and I pressured him to leave, thinking it would bring us closer. But instead, we ended up burning through all our savings, including our PF withdrawals, in just 2 months. The plan was to sustain with the money for 6 months. And we didn't. It evaporated in 2 months and my debts only bloody grew. I don't know what the hell I was thinking. And to this day, by the way, I feel guilty for dragging him out of a stable job, even though I know he could have said no. Amidst all this chaos, I made one life-changing decision. I brought Dope into my life, my first dog, who is today 8.5 years old, and he became my emotional anchor. During my darkest days, I'm glad, I think he helped me live. I remember walking into what is it called? The breeder, one Sunday, overwhelmed with sadness and depression, and walking out with Dope, a tiny 1.5 kg bright light in my otherwise stormy life. And I think he gave me a purpose outside of my struggles and made me feel motherly and nurturing in a way I had never experienced before. Dope really taught me responsibility, and he gave me a reason to smile, even on the worst days. He is now 8.5 years old, and I can confidently say that bringing him into my life was one of the best decisions I have ever made. But despite all these efforts, he wasn't going to take my debts away. To hold everything together, my depression only deepened. The weight of my family's dependence, my financial downfall, and my toxic relationship all together with Fatang was just too much for someone 26 years or 27 years old to bear. I needed to step away from it all, which led me to go to Assam for a few months, a period that marked the beginning of my separation from Fatang. So the downward spiral in my second relationship truly began when I had to go back to Assam. This was a decision, by the way, driven by desperation and necessity. By this point, I was completely out of money, flat broke. I was due on my rent. I was barely able to feed myself. I was jobless for 3 months after leaving Dell. And though I initially tried to make things work with Fatang, it became clear that I was utterly alone in all my struggles, and he wasn't the one going to support me. Every time a crisis hit, you know what he would do? He would pack his bags and run to his mother's house. because he was a Bangalorean. He lived in Bangalore and he lived with me in my rent house, leaving me to face everything on my own. And when the storm passed, he would just come back as if nothing ever happened. This pattern repeated itself over and over. And while it made me stronger though and more independent, it also showed me the kind of partner I should never settle for again. It was a harsh, but I'll tell you, it was a invaluable lesson. And he taught me what a weak, irresponsible partner looks like. And for that, I will always be thankful to Fatang. So thank you if you're watching. Because even in pain, there are lessons that shapes us for the better, isn't it? And back in Assam, when I went to Assam, I think the reality of my family's situation only deepened my despair. My dad's health had deteriorated even further. His diabetes, arthritis, and other conditions rendered him unable to work. My mom, on the brink of retirement, did everything she could, but the financial burden of our family's survival fell squarely on my shoulders. My sister, trapped in the same toxic marriage after giving birth to Ronnie, my beautiful nephew, who my mom and dad was now starting to raise because she couldn't and her husband was incapable of. So we had no other means of survival at that time. One of the hardest phases my family has seen, I have to tell you that. I don't know how I'm saying this without crying, but in that time, we restored to pawning every piece of jewelry we had, gathering whatever funds we could just to keep afloat, you know. It was so humiliating, hurtful, heartbreaking, but humbling, all at once. And with the little money I managed to pull together, I somehow returned to Bangalore because I needed the medical insurance from corporates for my dad to keep going. And I was determined I'll keep going. I used those funds to cover overdue rent, survive for a couple of months while I scrambled to find a new job. And eventually I got hired at Vodafone as a training manager, I remember. And with that, I began to claw my way back inch by inch, slowly but surely. But the stress, the financial pressure, and the emotional turmoil were taking a toll on me. You know, I was sinking deeper into depression, gaining weight, feeling utterly lost in life. Through it all, I avoided taking responsibility for my situation. I ignored phone calls from lenders, silenced my phone and hoped the problem would disappear. But of course it didn't. The calls kept coming. Banks needed their EMIs, friends needed their money back, colleagues and acquaintances of course wanted the money back, all demanding the money I own, and rightfully so. Like I said, it was only, I think when I hit rock bottom one day, sitting alone in my rent house with no therapy, no guidance, no fatang, that I forced myself to confront the reality. I had to survive. This is what I kept telling myself. The moment of accountability, guys, was a turning point. I remember telling myself, Rinima, you have made mistakes, but you have to own them. You are human too. You are flawed, but you are also strong. Forgive yourself and show yourself some grace. You have survived so far and you will keep surviving. And that's when I remember picking up my phone. I began answering calls one by one, explaining my situation, promising everyone that, listen, I'm going to repay you guys every rupee I owe, even if it might take time. And while not everyone was, of course, sympathetic, many appreciated my honesty and intention. And taking ownership of my mistakes, facing my debts head on was terrifying, but it also gave me a newfound sense of power. And this phase, you know what it taught me? That bloody survival is key. There is no shame in doing whatever it takes to stay afloat. At the time, it felt humiliating, of course. It was soul-crushing. But looking back now, I'm nothing but proud of myself, proud of the strength I found to live for my family, to fight for them despite everything. And that's why I truly believe that having a supportive, loving family is the greatest asset anyone can have. And that's what I'm trying to build today with my husband too. My parents, though unaware of the full extent of my struggles, gave me the love and faith I needed to keep going. It's why I want to tell anyone listening to this, you are stronger than you think. And survival is not easy. I'm not going to sugarcoat it, but it's worth it. Please take accountability. Please forgive yourself and keep moving forward. And let's talk about bloody society. Because where was society when I was drowning? Nowhere. Society failed me, just it has failed countless others. Society's role should have been to uplift, isn't it? To provide support, to judge fairly like a just system. But instead, you know what it does? It judges you blindly, selfishly and harshly. And that is why today I refuse to live by society's terms anymore. Society wasn't there when I needed it most, so why should I live for it? My journey is mine to own. And if my story can inspire even one person to rise above the judgments and to fight for themselves, then sharing it is worth it. It is totally worth it. Now, the final blow or the final nail in the coffin came when I returned from Assam after spending about a month there, where I was desperately trying to gather funds to survive and come back and find a new job. You know what was happening with Fatang? Sorry, by this point, I'd already started realizing that Fatang wasn't the man I needed. I saw too many red flags, violence and leching at women, no commitment. He has proved himself really irresponsible, untrustworthy, incapable of supporting me emotionally or otherwise. But I think what truly broke me, what shattered whatever was left of the relationship, was that what I discovered on his laptop upon my return from Assam. He had lent it to me while he was away at work, and as I searched through the history to find, honestly, I was trying to find a streaming site to binge watch The Real Housewives of Beverly Hills, I stumbled upon something that would disgust me to my core. So Fatang had been stalking two of my close friends, girlfriends, women he knew through me and hung out through me a couple of times, looking at hundreds of their pictures online, and a couple of young girls who were his cousin's friends. And you know, guys, for me, loyalty is bloody everything. Until today, character, integrity, and fidelity are non-negotiables. While I had somehow endured his violence and irresponsibility, this was a total deal breaker to me. It was not just the act of him stalking other women. It was the fact that these were my friends, and he did that while I was away. And it brought back deeply traumatic memories of what Gandu had done to me years ago. I remembered how Gandu would take the names of other women, sometimes even my friends, while being intimate with me. And fuck, it was disgusting, sickening, and it left scars that I thought I had moved past. And seeing similar behavior in Fatang, a man who had once helped me escape a violent relationship, it felt like betrayal on every level because he was almost doing the same things. It was a reminder of how manipulative and morally broken some people can be. And I want to make this clear, guys or girls. If you're in a relationship where your partner does this, eyes on your girlfriends and does these nasty things, please leave immediately, because I'll tell you, this is not normal. This is not love. This is sickness. And it needs to be called out for what it is. And that's what I'm doing. And you know, when I confronted Fatang, you know what his response was? Even worse. Instead of remorse, he resorted to violence once again, pinning me down, grabbing me by my neck, and shoving me to the floor. I could have bloody died for the kind of injury I would have taken in my back. I remember the rage and helplessness boiling inside me, but this time, you know what? I didn't freeze like I had before when guys beat me. I fought back. I grabbed the pepper spray he had ironically brought me for my protection and sprayed it directly into his face. And that moment was pivotal. Huh? It was like a shift within me. A realization that I deserved better, that I had to protect myself because no one else was going to. And the very next day, I booked my ticket again back to Assam. I didn't care about anything else, not the rent, not the job, not the relationship, not even Dope at that point, who was almost 6 months old. I needed to leave and focus on me. And for 7 months, I stayed home, surrounded by my family, mainly my dad. He was alive at the time, healing from everything I had been through. And those 7 months were so crucial. They gave me the space to introspect, to reevaluate my choices, my life, my patterns, and to plan for a better future. And yes, even during that time, I was grateful that Fatang took care of Dope, the little puppy who had become my anchor in one of the darkest periods of my life. So I'm appreciative of that. Dope is still with me today, along with his son, Cope, and they are my world. But we will talk more about Dope and the lessons he brought into my life in the next episode, because I think it's been a lot today. But I have to tell you, in those 7 months at home with Dad, I almost met the third toxic relationship of my life. Something I will share in the next episode, third and hopefully the last. But what I want to emphasize here is this, guys. Sometimes you need to walk away from everything and focus solely on yourself. And it's not selfish. It's survival. You cannot pour from an empty cup, and you cannot rebuild your life if you're running on fumes. Healing is not just a necessity. It is a responsibility that we all owe ourselves. So please take the time to sit down, introspect, and reevaluate everything. Replan, realign, and most importantly, come back stronger. Life will knock you down repeatedly. It's a given, but it's how you rise after every fall that defines your strength. And in that rising, you reclaim your power. I did it, and I know that you will too. And so as we wrap up this chapter of my story, I want to speak directly to every woman out there listening to me. I know it's not easy to share the messy, broken part of us, the mistakes, the failures, the embarrassing, humiliating relationships that left us scarred, and society doesn't make it easy for sure. I could have easily skipped over these chapters, stuck to the shiny parts of my life, and painted a perfect picture for you today. But that's not who I am. Because perfection doesn't teach us. You know what does? Pain. Vulnerability does. And if sharing my story, every messy, painful detail helps even one woman out there, then it's worth every judgment, every whisper, and every piece of gossip that might come my way after this episode. You see, society is loud in its judgment, but silent in its support. When I was sinking in debts, humiliated and fighting to keep my family afloat, I remember just one thing: where was society? When I was getting beaten behind closed doors, where was society? When I was struggling to love myself, to survive, and almost wanted to kill myself, to find my way out of darkness, where was society? It wasn't there, and it never will be. So why do we let society hold so much power over us? I will never understand. Why do we fear its opinion when its hand is never there to lift us up when we fall? Here is the truth, ladies. You don't owe society anything. You owe yourself everything. You owe yourself love, forgiveness, grace, and most importantly, the courage to rise again. Life is going to knock you down, like I told you, hard and often. People will disappoint you. Partners will betray you. Circumstances will test you in ways you never thought possible. But through it all, the one person who will always be there for you is you. This makes me so emotional because it's so painful to say these stories to you. But you are your greatest strength, your biggest ally, and your own savior. So let me tell you this again, that there is no shame in survival. If you have to fight, beg, borrow, or rebuild your life from scratch, do it. Survival is a victory. To my fellow women out there, don't gatekeep your stories. Please share them. Please speak up. Please stand tall, because your story has the power to save someone else. We are stronger together, aren't we? And the more we share, the more we learn, the more we grow as a tribe. And it's time to break free from the shackles of shame, of societal judgment. We're going to be in 2025 in just a few days. It's important to stand in our truth, because the truth is so liberating. It's empowering, it's life-changing. So as I close this episode, because I've spoken so much and given you so much gyan, I want to leave you with this. You are enough, darling. You're stronger than you know, braver than you believe, and more resilient than you can imagine. Maybe this will become a quote someday. So don't let anyone, no partner, no society, no fear, make you doubt that, okay? Stand tall, love yourself fiercely, because love is life, and never stop fighting for the life you deserve. I fought, and I think I've made a beautiful life for myself today. This is your story, like how this is mine, and you are the hero of it. Own it, love it, share it. Until next time, darlings, take care of yourself. Prioritize your happiness. I'm going to keep saying it. Most importantly, love yourself unapologetically, okay? And before I sign off, though, if this episode resonated with you, if you took away even one small lesson, or it simply made you feel less alone, please consider supporting this podcast. Like, subscribe, share it with the women in your life who you think could benefit from hearing this story. Because my objective is to create a space where we learn, we grow, we share, and we lift each other up. Leave a comment below, sharing your thoughts or your experiences, your story, because your voice matters. It matters at least to me. And please don't forget to follow me on Instagram, where I share more candid stories on a daily basis, conversations like these. And yeah, I'll see you on the other side. And I always gonna believe that together we can break the barriers of silence and empower one another. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you for your love. Thank you for your time. Until next time, take care of yourself. You are stronger than you think, and you deserve nothing but the best in life. I'll see you in the episode 8, where I talk about the next asshole I went on dating. So stay tuned. There are more. We spoke about Gandu, we spoke about Fatang. Next one, I think we're going to call him Chutia. What's it? See ya.